Right here, just about on time. Bear with me today, first time in the hot seat, so I'll try to get through this without making a fool of myself. I'm sure Laura will keep me in line as we go on today. As a reminder for everybody, the mission of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to optimize transportation services and development in our region. The vision of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to maximize the airport's benefit to our region. Welcome to our guests from the public. We do appreciate any participation and comments you may have throughout the day, so please feel free to do so. If you do have a comment, please just stand up, state your name and address, and we'd love to have your comments. So, with that, we'll do a quick roll call. Commissioner Aritz.
Here.
Commissioner Bakke is absent. Commissioner Gibbs.
Here.
Commissioner Hogan is absent. Commissioner Lalonde is here. And Commissioner Timbo.
Here.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. With the quorum of the board, we'll call the meeting into session. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action that do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. Items today are A, approval of board meeting minutes from September 2022. Payroll checks totaling $154,687.77. Maintenance and operation checks number 27067 to 27125, totaling $1,206,429.48. Approved passenger facility charge totaling $40,337.70. And financial reports for September 2022. Does any board member have an item or issue they would like to pull for additional discussion? All right. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make the motion. Second.
Motion and a second. Fair enough. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye and nay. The ayes have it. Consent agenda is approved. Move on to the director's report.
Yes, thanks. Welcome, everybody. One thing I was just going to point out on the financial reports, we're through the summer now into the fourth quarter, and summer traffic typically is higher than any other time of year. And this fiscal year is going to be a little bit odd because the seats were constrained certainly throughout much of the summer. So it'll be interesting to see how we do in the back half of the fiscal year because we actually have more seats coming in springtime than we had in 19, whereas leading up to this point in the year, we've had less seats than we had in 19. December is kind of the break point for us this year in terms of the capacity. We're a little under in October, just barely, a little more under in November from 2019 volume. By the time we get to December, we're only down about 3%, in large part because Allegiant has a pretty aggressive schedule this coming December, and then also the bigger planes are now fully transitioning into our market. We're seeing the end of the 50-seat jet in Great Falls as we speak. We'll be an all E-jet market here in the next week. So we'll have 3 a day Salt Lake, 2 a day Denver, 1 a day Seattle, all E-jet. So all 76-seat equipment, which is obviously an upgrade. So by the time we get to January and February, we'll actually be plus about 12-15% every month on capacity over 2019 levels. If we can fill those seats, then passenger traffic should start pretty strong for the year. And we should be able to maintain some of the revenue increases we're seeing. I mean, if you look at the revenue year to date, like I said, summer typically being a strong period, but this summer constrained by seats, so it's difficult to make a full look out of that. But the concession-related revenues which are almost entirely passenger driven, were extremely strong this summer. Rental cars kind of headlining that. They're well over budget in the first half of the year, through September anyway. Food and beverage, both doing very well, gift doing very well. All those denominated categories by passenger are doing very well. So we're about 186% of budget coming out of September. So really strong there. Hopefully as the passenger volume comes, we'll be maintaining that strength. Parking revenue, pretty much right on the forecast. Actually, summer is not a particularly strong period for parking. Seems as though a lot of people get someone to drive them to the airport that time of year, and so we don't see a lot of parking big days. In fact, it looks to us like the parking lot's been much fuller in October than any time in the last 4 months. So it'll be interesting to see here at the end of the month what that revenue is. As we come up on a year of parking operations now, we'll have a pretty good baseline to start forecasting parking revenue going forward. So some exciting trends there on the financials. In other news, the transition to private screening is now just a little less than a week away, as we'll make that transition on the 1st of the month. Things seem to be on track. There'll be some people coming in from other private airports that DCS has, along with their partner company. So they'll be bringing in some people. From our understanding, they have been able to hire a couple dozen people. So we think over the next few months, it takes them quite a while to get them through the training pipeline. But we think over the next few months that visiting security screening will go away and be replaced by folks here locally. And so seems to be a pretty positive story there. We did get quite a few applicants at the little job fair we had last month. I think about 40 people ended up coming, and I think 30 of them applied for DCS. So that was positive. On the traffic side, as I said, volume continues to rebound. Looking forward to spring. Year to date, I think calendar year to date, we're just about flat completely over last year. We should finish the year a little bit to the positive, 1 or 2% to the positive over the prior year calendar year. And then starting the new calendar year, it looks as though we might actually have some substantial increases. So that's really positive looking into next year. On the warehouse development, we're pretty much done with the construction over there. The contractor is still waiting on approval. The city has a new paving design standard, and so they've submitted several mixed designs, but they haven't gotten one approved yet. So they're awaiting that. I don't know, Rod, has there been anything new in that last week on that?
No.
No. So once they can get that pavement mix design approved, they'll hopefully get that pavement done yet this year. I imagine the plant will probably shut off here in the next few weeks, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe we need to figure out who we need to call on that. So once we have that paved, that'll be the end of that project for the year. We've had some back and forth with the city with city planning on the amendment to the agreement. We did receive a draft amendment on Friday with the increases in the cost. You may recall when we put that budget together in 2019, we thought we were right around $770, $780 to deliver utilities to that site. The actual cost is going to be closer to $1.1 million. About $1 million of that is eligible for TIF reimbursement. So we did get some comments from planning on our LoopNet listing that they wanted to see more in there about manufacturing. So we made some changes to that. We do have one pretty good lead for the spot. Actually, we think they might be interested in all the 23 units. They take the 2023 units, the ones we plan to build next year. So that would be really positive. They are a manufacturer in the food business. So we think that would be a good fit for everybody. So hopefully we'll be able to get that deal going. We will be asking today for a committee of the board to work on real estate negotiations with us, just so we have a little bit of a head start in discussing some of the incentives we might offer to that first tenant, because they are a potential large tenant. They may eventually want a much bigger space. So we'd like to have some conversations with a subset of the board about that. The construction update, just to give you kind of idea. Oh, let me give you the FAA conference update first. We met with the FAA last week to go over our capital plans. We had a good discussion about the bipartisan infrastructure. What's the L for it? Law, okay, Bill. Law, bipartisan infrastructure law, discretionary portion. That's the part that's awarded based on the merits of the project and competitiveness. And that money is targeted towards terminals, namely, which is kind of the opposite of what our traditional AIP, Airport Improvement Fund program, is targeted toward, which is primarily targeted towards airfields. We did submit a grant application just yesterday for that discretionary portion. See, what was the total amount?
7.57.
Thank you. 7.57 million is what we're asking for out of the discretionary pool. That program has two components. It would be our security project that we want to put in place. This building being a 1975 construction, we don't have any data or power really where you would want to have it in order to arm doors. And so we're hopeful that that project might be competitive to help us do that. Our ideal ask would be to put a pin pad and a card reader on all of the airside doors. Also the two gates that serve the terminal secure area, kind of on either end of the building. And then we would have cameras throughout those areas too, so we can see what's happening at those doors. And so we're hopeful that'll compete. In addition to that, we've also asked for funding for an energy efficiency project. We'd like to replace a great number of these windows. As you can imagine, that concrete caisson that goes all the way to the outside basically operates like a heat sink. If you go over and touch it in the wintertime, it's cold. In the summertime, it's hot. And there really isn't any way to stop it. And so what we'd like to do is take out the majority of those caissons and replace it with newer self-tinting windows, which are much more energy efficient. We took a look at some of the ones at the Missoula terminal. We were down there last week. So we'd have basically much larger window orifices, and we would do away with a lot of that concrete caisson. In addition to the concrete itself, it also creates a shading effect, which does help us in the summer, but not in the winter. As the sun travels across the front, it kind of acts like a blind and keeps that heat energy from coming in the winter time. And so we're hopeful we can get some funds to do that. That would be a big leap forward. We'd also like to insulate a lot of the concrete. In other parts of the building, like that column right there, we have solid slabs of concrete that are open to the outside. Those operate much the same way. They're cold in the winter and hot in the summer. The elevator bank downstairs is a good example. If you've ever taken the elevator on the front of the building in the wintertime, you can literally see your breath in there because that concrete really isn't insulated. So ideally, we would get some funding to put up a panel system to try and keep some of the heat in the building in the winter and cool out, or cool in the summer to surface that building. And so those are the main components we've submitted for. Two of the criteria, we feel there's about 5 different criteria in that bill application. We feel we really have a good shot based on 2 of them. One of them was actually energy efficiency. And then there was another one for prolonging the life of existing infrastructure, which we think we're doing both of those with a building this old. There was actually a third one that asked if the money would serve in historically underprivileged, disadvantaged communities. And obviously with the tribal structure around us, several reservations, and also several tribes, even here in town, we feel that's also the case. So we feel like we have a decent application. I think we're going to hear relatively shortly. It sounds like they're going to try to vet those even before the end of the year. So we might start to hear something on that relatively quickly. And the other thing we discussed with the FAA, we have an open listening session. A lot of the FAA leadership in the region is there during those meetings, and I brought up the new legislation, rewrite of the legislation with regard to GA taxi lanes at the meeting that says basically we can't pave areas 50 feet from a door. And one of the folks from Idaho pointed out, well, that only says apron. It doesn't necessarily say you couldn't do taxi lanes. So there's a good discussion, I think, going forward at the regional level about what exactly that means. And it looks to us like we're going to be able to pave those GA taxi lanes off the main trunk line that we've already built and pay for that with our grant funds. That was always the case historically. But the rewrite seemed to imply that we couldn't do that any longer, as we were told by the FAA. And so now it looks like we might even get reimbursed. We spent about $100,000 and some just in the last week or two paving one of those. We wanted to get, we had indicated to the tenant we would put in one of the two that's required to build T-hangars as a way to get that development going. So now I've already asked the FAA for reimbursement for that at 90% so we could get that funding back. Potentially even a positive into that project. There might be enough money in there to amend it to where we could potentially get that money back this year. So that's a positive development. I've also told the FAA we'd like to escalate the paving of the rest of those up to next year. We'll probably delay the entry road project another year. The entry road's still in pretty good shape, and we want to take advantage of that base that just got built. Right now, if you went out there, there's a good compacted base with at the right grade. If we let that weather a couple more years, that would all have to be reconditioned and repacked and rebuilt as the water works on that dirt. And so if we can get that paved next summer, I think there's an excellent chance we can reclaim a lot of that base and build pretty much right on top of it to get those taxi lanes in, and then we would have everything built out in that GA development ready to go. So encouraging conversation there. On the construction side, the icing ramp is nearing the completion of phase one. Phase one's the majority of the pavement. They need to come back and kind of pave the area between the old terminal ramp and the new terminal ramp next year. We won't get to that this year. They need about probably another 6-7 days really of decent weather to complete phase one yet this year. And it looks like they'll get it in the next week or two. Hopefully they'll be able to get that entirely buttoned up, so we'll have that phase one done. Then we'll be back in the spring to finish the rest of it. On the terminal buildings, the ticket lobby project, the contractor has enclosed about half, or has built the foundation for the enclosure about half of the building. They're framing the other half right now. So the east side, the foundation wall is already up, which goes up about 3 or 4 feet above the ground. That'll be closed off here in the next couple of weeks. They'll pour this side over here probably the next few days, I would think.
Yeah.
Thursday,
Right.
you said.
Yeah, it got bumped till Tuesday.
Yep. We'll get that paved, and then that area will get enclosed. And by the time we meet next month, we should be enclosed in the back of the building there and getting close to weather tight. So that's really exciting. They've also blown out some of the walls connecting the airlines in the back. So we're making some progress there, and they're about to take down the big wall that kind of on the current ticket counter that goes down the middle of the, or down the side of the current ticket counter. They'll be pulling that out here probably the next few days too. So really good progress being made there. They're still thinking Delta will probably move in January. So we'll start to see some of those areas beginning to open here even in a couple months. Out front on the sidewalk, the first phase is complete. They moved to the second phase. They're finishing up the pouring on that today. You probably saw when you came in. That middle section will be paved, and they'll move on to the third phase, the farthest down. They've got to dig down, get the pipe in, and then pave on top of that. So they probably still have a few weeks, I would think, in order to complete that project. The signs, we don't have any concurrence from FAA yet.
No, we're waiting for Joe,
Still
so
waiting on
it's
that.
probably gonna be next week now.
Yeah, we got a bid finally on the sign project. Our engineer has gone through it. It's under engineer's estimate. We'd like to award it, but that takes FAA concurrence, and we didn't get that. Unfortunately, it's elk season and our guy's gone, so hopefully next week, or maybe he'll get something to come home early, I don't know. But we should hopefully get that project under construction yet this year. We'll see if the contractor thinks they can move ahead with winter conditions and whatnot, but we'd like to get that going. Anything I missed on construction there, Rod?
Yeah, I think you got it all.
Okay. And then we have had the auditors in. They've completed their field work. I don't know if they've talked about setting up a meeting with the finance committee. I don't think so.
Not yet.
Probably
No,
a
I
couple-
think she was out last week too.
Yeah, probably another few weeks until they get to the point where we can set up a meeting with the finance committee. So we'll have to do that probably at the November meeting, sometime around in there. Maybe we might see a draft. I think we'll probably leak into the next year with the audit in terms of getting it adopted, which is not ideal, but everyone's got the same personnel issues, and the last couple of years we've had a hard time getting it done in time. So, and that's all I have.
Did we get the confusion squared away on that loop net?
Yeah, I think so. We did get an amendment from them on Friday, so I think hopefully soon. I sent it to Mick this morning. Hopefully he'll be reviewing the amendment, and then hopefully we'll get on the city commission here in the next couple of months or next couple of weeks to go in and amend that agreement.
So we're going to actually amend.
We have to amend it for them now. Yeah, like I said, the construction costs were much higher by the time we did it. We get that inflation on the PVC primarily. I think PVC was the biggest delta, wasn't it, Rod?
Yeah,
From engineers' estimates.
Yeah.
And so PVC pipe was the worst. I mean, obviously everything was up, but we did it substantially above, what we initially thought. So we'll have to amend that agreement. And our goal would be to bring that back to the board probably in November for the amendment. There's not much to it. It's just simply changing the values, but yeah. And then we'll sell the bonds hopefully in the spring. There's the amount of money that's actually collected in there has gone up quite a bit. So we'll amend the agreement so we can collect that money immediately. Once we get the amendment done, we can go and begin asking for reimbursement since the money's already spent. And I think all the utilities have been certified, haven't they now? The city's accepted
yeah,
them?
it's all,
So we should be able to submit our project logs and collect about $250,000 cash, and then the rest of it will have to be bonded. We have 1 year, pretty much from this week, to get the bonds sold, or the TIF does expire. So we are, in a sense, kind of up against it in terms of getting the project done. So.
You mentioned several weeks ago there was that money that we got to bring potentially American in, that Helena might be pursuing the same route.
Yeah, I think they've asked for an amendment on theirs. I saw that reported down there. So they're going to amend. They initially got a SCASD grant for Phoenix service, but I don't know if there was a lot of interest in that. And so they're pursuing an amendment to go to Dallas, which is obviously the same route we just got an award on. And so I think there'll be, some competition there in terms of, who might be able to get that route. It's also possible it could be a day of the week where we might have some days and they might have some days, that flight. Then they could share maybe some operating costs, ground handling and that kind of thing. So it's hard to say. In talking to the airlines last month, everyone is saying the same thing. The pilot crisis continues to constrict. Actually, everybody's continuing to drop routes. I saw United just dropped a few cities, or a few repetitions of cities a few weeks ago. Frontier just announced they're leaving Missoula, so they won't actually be active in all of Montana now. So it's continuing to tighten. And everyone expects it to tighten until 24. Because of COVID, DOT has extended those grants. So they're now good for 5 years. So we have 5 years to get service and still use that grant. I don't suspect it'll take that long, but I am starting to think it's probably more of a 2024 project than it is a 2023, just because no one has any pilots.
Anybody else have any questions? Perfect. All right, I guess we'll move on to item number 1. U.S. Customs Lease Amendment.
Laura, do you want to present that one?
All right, so Dwight has had this contract with us since 2003. He provides a building and the maintenance and upkeep to the building that houses U.S. Customs over on down the road here. We're required to have that to be an international airport. We went through a few of the things. Last meeting we talked about, Dwight came and talked about some of the benefits that we have with having the U.S. Customs there. And we added a couple things in here. We have average about 2 international flights per day, and then FedEx uses that to process an international cargo flight every Saturday. It's not a huge money maker for us to have this on site, but it is an important piece to have on site. If we do lose the service, it would probably be hard to get it back. There's new requirements for the building and processing, I would guess. It'd probably be very expensive if we got it back as well, because we would no longer be grandfathered into what we've got going over there right now. So, and the other point is that we do have people that are interested either because we have customs or we have the foreign trade zone, and those kind of tie together. And so it is a good amenity to have here on the airport. So what Dwight has proposed is a 5-year extension with a 5-year option. On top of that, the rental rate on the building is staying the same at $12 a square foot annually, but he wants an increase in the custodial maintenance and utility rate from $5.75 to $8.02. That's an annual increase to the airport of about $5,400 a year. And the entire cost of the lease is $55,000 that we pay to Dwight to handle this, or to Holman Aviation to handle this contract. So we do recommend going forward with this, with the 5-year lease with the 5-year option. No questions?
It's an odd model, but the customs does require you to provide free, and it's entirely free, not even just operating costs. I mean, they pay for the agents, and then you have to provide a building and utilities and cleaning to their specification. And every year, it seems, the specifications get more intricate and more detailed, and you can grandfather in at the point you get customs there, and then you don't have to continue to upgrade. Every so often, there's some upgrades that seem like we have to meet those in order to continue to do what we're doing. But if you stop and then go back and have a new agreement with customs, you have to catch all the way up. And I think that would be a painful scenario. If we ever want to have it, I think the best option is to keep it rather than let it go and then try to get it back.
I mean, what are the other options, short of building our own facility that we own at least one?
You have a couple options. I mean, we could charge for the service, in which case you can't be considered an international airport. International signals to the user that it's a free customs clearance. So there are other airports, even in the state, that have customs, but they charge. So you can do that. That's one step down from where we are. That would more or less mean we couldn't handle any commercial flights at all because we're not going to get multiple agents. So you're probably going to be limited to the GA, which I think is like 8, isn't it, Dwight, on a plane? A GA international rating.
I'm not sure that
I think
a bit higher than that.
I think it's 8. I think there's an 8, and then there's another one that's a step up from that that's like 18 or 16. It's like the Metrojet size, and so, there are various slices in there. But I don't know that, well, I mean, we'd have to work with customs to see if they would still process FedEx with less staffing. And then the other option is we just don't invite customs here any longer, in which case, we would no longer have clearance of any kind, which a lot of airports are that way. I mean, there's plenty of them where there isn't a customs or agriculture agent, and you just can't bring in any GA flights or any cargo or anything like that that could process here.
So really, it sounds like it would kind of handcuff FedEx.
The worst impact would be on FedEx. Not that they couldn't go elsewhere with that flight. I think it's a convenience for them, but I also think in the future it's a potential opportunity for us because Vancouver, for example, I think still clears in customs or in Spokane. And maybe over time that might be an opportunity for us to consolidate some additional FedEx services here. We've certainly talked to them in the past, and they have cleared that Vancouver flight here when Spokane's had ramp construction and things like that for a summer. That flight's cleared through here. So, as their network grows, I think it does create opportunity. And one day when Prime Air is starting to get into smaller markets, that might be yet another opportunity. So there certainly are from time to time opportunities that go through. I think the last one I can remember that was really a serious opportunity that actually happened, I guess I should say, rather than just tire kicking type of stuff, which we probably get one a year of potential tenants that think they might use it for something. Sometimes it's not even really well defined. But the last one we really had that actually happened was somebody that wanted to import cigarettes and use the foreign trade zone to hold that inventory and get the duty benefit of the cigarettes. And that project actually got built, I think, up in Shelby. But they, we were talking to them for quite a while about locating that here. So there are occasional opportunities that, that involve customs that, where that foreign trade zone ability and having customs on site would be a big deal.
The trade zone could potentially benefit the warehouse.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one where we think, one of the things I saw happening in one of those condo developments was a fella had some aluminum bending capabilities, and he would make signboards, like for a local business, you might see out on front of a Domino's Pizza or something. And so he would print the faces, he would bend the aluminum, and then he was buying LEDs, almost definitely from China, that he would install in there, and then he could sell you a signboard. And so, I mean, I think it's something like that where a substantial part of that inventory is probably that LED. So he could bring that in duty-free, potentially in a place like this, in a foreign trade zone, and manufacture that sign, and then that would be a U.S. made good. So he would never pay the duty on that import. So that's a really simple example, but one that potentially could be beneficial. One of the ones I saw in Seattle, for example, there was a car maker, I think it was BMW, one of those, that had parts made in Asia. The majority of them were used in the US, but quite a few of them went back to Germany. And so they would actually import them to Seattle and then send them bulk to Seattle, and then they could hold those and send the European portion to Europe without ever paying tax on US for that.
Any more questions? Can I have a motion to recommend approving the lease amendment for an additional 5 years?
I'll make a motion.
Motion and a second. Any additional comments? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye and nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Cool. Number 2, Turo.
Laura, do you want to present that one also?
So, Turo is, a couple of you weren't here last time, so I'll repeat some stuff. But it's different where someone who has a car sitting out in their garage that they're not using can go ahead and list it. Well, they could be using their car, but regardless, they have a car that they don't want to have access to every day. They throw it out on Turo once they're in your market, and then people can search those up and basically rent the car from a private individual rather than from a standard car rental company. So other cities in Montana have been using Turo, especially at the airports. They have got agreements with Turo. Bozeman and Missoula. I think you see further down in there, I mean, Missoula is estimating that they're making about $160,000 a year on the Turo. And it really, we do have a car rental representative here, but from what I'm seeing and talking to people, it's really not taking away from what the car rental companies are doing at the airport. They're doing well. They're maxing out on the cars that they have available. We have no vacancy quite often at our car rental counters down here. So what we would be doing is starting an agreement with Turo. They're already doing it, but that's the private owners doing it. They're really told that they're not supposed to be doing it until they have an agreement with the airport. But this would make it official where at least the airport will now benefit from what is already happening. So we would sign this agreement with Turo so that the local people can go ahead. There's not a lot of cars out on our Turo page right now. What'd you say, like 2
15
pages?
maybe,
Yeah.
about 15 or so.
So there's not a lot
Compared
out
to
there.
about 4 times or 5 times that in Bozeman.
Yeah. But it should grow with time. And then we would get 10% off of each one of those rentals, just like we do with the car rental companies that are here. So we're treating them the same way. In return for that 10%, they're allowed to operate here We will allow them to do, in the metered lot out here, we'll allow them to do in-person exchange. Has to be 5 minutes or less, where they're just meeting the person, giving them the car, and then they go. What we're being told by Turo is that most customers and most hosts do not like to do that anyhow. What they're gonna do is they're gonna use our parking lots and pay the regular rate, because they're using an app because they don't want that person-to-person contact. So they will park it, the person will come and get it, take it out, and pay a couple bucks to get out, and then when they come back, they'll put it back in the parking lot, and then the host will come back up and get it and pay to get it out of the lot. So that's a little additional revenue as well. We don't know for sure. We estimate that, this could add 40, 50,000 additional revenue to us. Hopefully it could grow from there, but bottom line is that it's getting revenue off of something that's already happening that we can capitalize on. So we would recommend going forward.
And I see it as a fairness issue. I mean, the activity is happening here already, and we've got rental cars that are paying us a concession fee of 10%, and, these guys aren't. And so I think we need to level that field and have an agreement with these people that they would also pay 10%. Because it would be nearly impossible for us to chase down the cars that are out there in the lot and tell them you can't be here anymore, go do it somewhere else. So this seems like a more equitable way to do it. And they're very easy to work with from what we understand from the other airports. They simply mail you a check and a report of the activity. The transaction actually happens at the phone level, so that it's pretty much automatic accounting, that's happening on their end, so that they know exactly when someone's done a deal here and when they should transmit that money. And then every month, Turo does send you that check. So the other guys have found it very easy to work with.
Is there any liability for us that comes with it?
No, not any more than we already have. We're already in these businesses today. And one of the nice things about Turo, as opposed to Craigslist or something, is they like Uber, they have the back end insurance requirements and all of that built into the company. So when you're doing business with Turo, that there is someone back there taking care of the liability issues and that type of thing from an agreement standpoint, as opposed to somebody just getting on Craigslist and saying, hey, I'll rent you my Wrangler for $100 a day, when they don't have the insurance or the licensing or anything to do that.
Is this something we would advertise or just?
Turo
will
advertise.
Interesting. Questions, comments, concerns, any public comment? Fair enough. Can I get a motion to approve authorization to proceed with discussion and negotiation for an agreement with Turo?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Got a motion?
I'll second.
And a second. Any further comment? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nay. So the ayes have it.
Thank you.
And number 3, capital project, front canopy rehabilitation.
Thank you. The front canopy is our next project that we plan to use our bill money on. The new fiscal year for the federal government starts here in a couple days, and so the FAA has been telling us that bill dollars will actually be available in November. So we want to start design on this project as soon as we can, and then get it out to construction next summer. Obviously the canopy, you can see it right here. It's original to the 1975 building. It has a number of systems that are failing on it. The signage system is failing on it. We had one fall off last winter during a snowstorm. The roofing system is failing. We did have a structural report done on the structure itself during the start of the summer, and it concluded the structure itself is in good shape, but the drainage system, for instance, is failing. The roof isn't always draining to the gutter system. The gutter system is internal. It's actually inside the structure. Somewhere in there, it's cracked and not working, and so the water is actually going through the cracks, and in some cases dripping out through the entryway on the covered side of the entryway. We want to fix that as quickly as we can, because that will cause damage to the structure if we don't address it. Part of addressing it is the drain system that's going with the sidewalk. We now have a place for all that water to go, so it's not collecting around those foundations and freezing. That'll be done here in a few weeks, and then next year we want to come in and renovate the rest of it. The main things we want to address are some additional lighting. It's a frequent comment that in the morning flights in particular, the front entrances are very dark. There isn't any additional lighting up there to really point out where an entrance is versus any other part of the canopy. So some people don't know exactly where to aim when they're heading in from the parking lot. So we want to add some additional lighting in there. We want to do away with the membrane system. It's an okay system, but we think a better system would be to actually take the perpendicular or the parallel element of the canopy and put a shed roof on it, probably just metal panel roof. That'll drain back to a gutter where we can collect and put in the new storm drain pipe and get it out of there. On the sections that are elevation different from on the entryways, our plan is to probably build up with some kind of siding to one height, so this all looks like one height, and then put a pitched roof element over that to collect water on both sides of it and get rid of it. We'll probably use plexi on that, and that'll give us a lighting opportunity to show where the entryways are. As you come in, you'll see that those different entryways illuminated. We'll also add some lighting under the parallel portion. It's pretty sporadic, and the lights are actually seated up in the rafters, so there isn't a lot of light coming out of the light structures that are currently there. I suspect we'll probably clad the front of it to give us a raceway on both sides to hide the water gutters and also to hide the additional conduit we need to add the lighting in there. We'll probably add some lighting elements right on the columns, so we've got some down lighting when you're looking down through there to kind of illuminate that pathway. We'll also address the signage. We'll pull the signage off the bottoms there and put it up on the top so it's a little more visible from the parking lot. So it'll just be on the front of that piece right there. We'll update that signage and get some new signage on there too. And so we think this project is going to be about $900,000. Right now we don't have any preliminary design. That's our best estimate based on what we're trying to accomplish. And we expect that to be 90% bill funded from our 2023 bill. And then the 10% we would charge to the airlines through the rates and charges to recover our local share. We have a design scope from the engineer that I've included in here. We continue to work on that. It's got to go out for an independent estimate. It looks as though what we'll likely do is combine this project with the West Vestibule project that's in the work session. Once we get that approved, assuming the board would approve it, we'll likely combine those two efforts because it's similar work. Probably easier to get one contractor to do it. And so when we bid that, it'll probably be a combined project. We'll also probably combine the design scopes so they're done at the same time. But we would like to proceed today with the approval of the canopy design and construction for $900,000.
So next summer to be done with this is what you're...
Yeah, well, hopefully this time next year we would have it done. It actually should go pretty quick because there's not a tremendous amount of work. We're not really building much. The roofing should be fairly simple. None of it's inside, really. I mean, this part here is, so we might add some insulation down below that roof. But really, we're not doing a whole lot of interior construction. So I would think this project would actually go pretty quick.
Questions, comments, concerns, anybody? Guys are quiet today. All right, can I get a motion to approve authorization to proceed with the design, bidding, and construction of front canopy rehabilitation project with an amount not to exceed $900,000? Motion. So, got a motion and a second. Any additional comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nay. The ayes have it. Make it look pretty. Awesome. Let's see here. Looks like that's all we have on the agenda. Any additional airport authority board comments? Commissioner Gibbs? Commissioner Timbo?
No.
Commissioner Garrett? I have no comments myself. Any additional public comments? Easy enough. All right, with no further business and no additional comments, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Back in 13 minutes. We'll be back. We'll be back.